All right, so before we get started coding, I think it's a good idea to talk about something called the scene graph and give you a little context on Three.JS. This website is called Three.JSfundamentals.org. And if we go to the home page, there's a collection of articles here that are all related to Three.JS. I recommend combing through these when you get a chance. There is some good information in here. So if we go to the first article, it's titled Fundamentals. And on this page, there's a great picture of the scene graph. You can think of this picture as kind of the Three.JS universe, and it consists of a renderer, a scene, and a camera. The renderer takes a scene and the camera and then uses that information to render the graphics onto the screen. So the scene is a tree-like structure which has several children, and those children can also have children. And if we go to the documentation for a scene, this is Three.js.org, we can see that the scene inherits from a class called Object3D. This is actually the base class for most objects in Three.js, and it provides a set of properties and methods for manipulating objects in 3D space. There's a note here that says that Object3D can be used for grouping objects, and that you can use the .add method to add an object as a child. However, a better way to do that is with the group object. There's a couple properties on Object3D that I want to point out. First of all is children, which is just an array of children. And again, they mention group here. The other is parent. Note that an object can have at most one parent. Each object also has a position, and it's important to note that an object's position is relative to its parent. Great, so we talked about Object3D, and we talked about group. The next thing I want to talk about is light. Light is exactly what it sounds like. It has a position, sometimes it has a direction, also generally has an intensity and a color. And it basically just interacts with materials in the scene and lights them up in different ways. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the mesh. What this graph is saying is that each mesh takes a geometry and a material. And we can go to the documentation with this link. And this says that a mesh is a class that represents a triangular polygon mesh. So let's click on this link, which actually takes us to the Wikipedia for what a polygon mesh is. And it's simply a collection of vertices, edges, and faces that define a shape. Essentially, it's the skin of a material. And we can see that each mesh takes a geometry and a material and has several other properties. Okay, so if we scroll down on this page, there's a great diagram of the frustum of a camera. And the frustum is formed by the near clipping plane, the far clipping plane, and the field of view. Anything inside the frustum will be rendered, and then anything outside of it will not be rendered. Now, if we scroll down a bit more, we'll see they have a few live examples here. This is a good one to show. So we have 3 spinning cubes here. It looks like there's some light. These 3 cubes are actually meshes. We can see there's a WebGL renderer here, perspective camera, directional light. We have some box geometry and mesh foam material that are combined into a mesh. And what I want to show you here is that if we change up this material, it'll affect the way that the cubes interact with light. So if I change this from mesh foam material to mesh basic material, and then I run this, so now you'll see that the cubes are not interacting with light at all. That's one of the properties of mesh basic material, is that it doesn't interact with light at all. So if I instead change this to mesh physical material, I can give it a clear coat property, set to 1, and then that makes it seem like my objects have like a shiny clear coat. You can also change the color, and we can change the geometries too. I can use sphere geometry, which just takes a radius and then number, basically a number of sides to render. So yeah, so that's a basic overview of the scene graph and some different materials that we can use in Three.js. So in the next video, we'll actually go about setting up a scene like this with vanilla Three.js.